Welcome to our episode of Biblical Archaeology from the Ground Down. Sponsored by Bible Interact and hosted by Dr. George Sparks. Now let's explore the field of archaeology in today's episode.
Another episode of Biblical Archaeology from the Ground Down. Because we were on the southwest side of Jerusalem and we were talking about the Pool of Siloam and the Pilgrim's Tunnel and the archaeological park, I thought it'd be interesting if we talked about some other features and other locations that were in the western quarter of the old city Jerusalem that tourists can go visit when Israel is back open for tourists, whenever that happens. And some of these locations have been around for a while, but people are just not aware of it. And I think it's just a shame sometimes that you're going to spend thousands of dollars to go to Israel. And here you might be at the Western Wall, and go and somebody might visit, more than likely, the archaeological park because they're very close. But then you have other locations such as the Burnt House,
right,
or the Wall Museum, which is kind of like the Burnt House, but it's more extensive. So today what I'd like to do is briefly talk about the Burnt House. And of course, we'll add pictures, and then we have a selection of artifacts very, very similar to what was excavated at that location.
Cool.
So today, this is what we have planned. It's not going to take that long. Hopefully, we'll be done in less than 20 minutes. I think it's fascinating. And it's another location that if you're in Israel, you can go visit this, and it's very worthwhile. So what is the Burnt House? The Burnt House is an archaeological museum. It is featuring preserved ruins from the first century. And it has a small exhibition of also the recovered artifacts when they were excavating the ruins of a first century house. A key feature of the site is also an audio-visual presentation. So if you go there, you don't necessarily need a guide. There's going to be a presentation there for you. And it plays within the excavation room. So each room that has been excavated, there's going to be a separate presentation for an individual to watch. The presentation also depicts the political strife within the Jewish community during the Great Revolt. Now we're talking about the first Jewish revolt. Right. It's going to talk about when it says the political strife. And last week we mentioned a coin that was found. It was a first Jewish revolt bronze coin, and it had on it for the redemption of Zion, and it was year 4. But they also had a year 1 to year 5, but the earlier coins had freedom of Zion. So the statement on the coin changed because the viewpoint of those fighting the war against the Romans had changed. And we kind of see this in the event of the Essenes. Those are the individuals that hid the Dead Sea Scrolls, that they believed there would be a messianic figure that would show up and help deliver the people from the Roman occupation and the Roman oppression. But it didn't happen. And the Romans were gaining more and more of an advantage. So now it looks like to these freedom fighters, are they relying more on the coming of the Messiah? Or now they're saying it looks like it's up to us, that we have to fight. Now, the Archaeological Museum is located in the Jewish quarter of Jerusalem's Old City, which was built around the ruins of the wealthy Second Temple era homes that were destroyed in 70 AD by the Roman siege. So what they're actually saying in this article is that the houses that were destroyed in the first century, lying in ruins, is underneath the Jewish community that live on the west side that are now, at that time, living above it. So there was an archaeological excavation that had to dig down meters to uncover the ruins of these first century homes that were destroyed during the Roman siege. And if you visit Jerusalem and go to the Jewish quarter, this is one of the locations that you can go see that's been excavated, called the Burnt House. Now, the house burned down during the First Jewish-Roman War. as the Roman legions led by General Titus, so Titus Vespasian, captured and destroyed Jerusalem and the Second Temple. So this is kind of, well, it is a fulfillment of what we read about in the New Testament, where Jesus said, you see these great buildings, you see these magnificent stones. There will not be one left upon another. So Jesus, around 30 CE, was talking about the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple a generation later, 40 years. So 30 years, Jesus makes this statement. 40 years later, 70 AD, the city and the temple is destroyed.
And then
Destroyed by who? Go ahead.
And then Titus's son commemorates it in the Arch of Titus in Rome, where he has a depiction on the inside of the arch of the menorah being carried off and the table of showbread and the trumpets on the inside of the Arch of Titus to commemorate this destruction of the temple in Jerusalem in 70 AD.
Yes. Not only that, there are a selection of Roman coins called Judea Capta.
Yep.
That celebrate the Roman victory over the Jews. And some say that they're gold coins that the Romans used, okay, that are Judea Capta gold coins, was from the gold that was in the temple that they took. Interesting. So the siege was marked by fire, famine, and eventually it became a slaughter. And this is recorded by Josephus, a first century Jewish historian.
Right.
Excavations led by Professor Nachman Avigad uncovered a house in the 1970s buried meters below the current street level under a layer of ash and destruction. Findings inside were approximately a 55 square meter home, which included signs of conflagration, a fancy word saying it was burned. So it had burnt stones, charred wood, layers of soot, iron nails from the collapsed wooden roofs, which provided vivid evidence of the initial destruction by fire. Now, artifacts that were found. A wide range of items were found scattered on the floor, including stone kitchen utensils, which suggested that the occupants adhered to a strict ritual of laws and purity. Well, that's interesting because we're on the west side, and this is where the wealthy and the priestly class during that time period of the first century lived. Coins were minted that they found between 67 and 69 CE. So if they're saying the coins were minted between 67 and 69, they're talking about the coins that were struck to commemorate the fighting, such as the coin that we saw that was freedom of Zion, or the restoration of Zion. Glass perfume containers were found, and inkwells, and also oil lamps. In what was likely the kitchen, archaeologists discovered the forearm bones of a young woman who was approximately 25 years old. Some describe that she was actually, the way she was facing, it was towards the exit. In other words, she's trying to leave the house while it was being destroyed or invaded by the Romans and burnt, and she didn't make it. Now, there's something else that was very interesting that was found. An iron spear was found leaning in a corner, and so it's up against the wall, which may have belonged to a Jewish fighter who lived in the house. Archaeological evidence, including an inscribed stone weight, also found strongly suggests that the house belonged to a priestly family called the Katros family. That family is also mentioned in the Talmud. And in the Talmud, where the family is mentioned, they were mentioned, but in a negative light. In other words, some of the priestly family were despised because of what we read about in our Gospels, of, you could say, the way they handled themselves, the selling of sacrifices. We talked about this before. In the museum, we found one of these weights, and the weight had red paint on it. But because the weight is 2,000 years old, some of this paint was gone, and you could see that inserted in the weight was a chunk of lead. So in the scriptural narrative, it says about dishonest people in the temple having two sets of weights, one for buying and one for selling. And maybe in the Talmud, this is how this Katros family was talked about negatively. In other words, how they're conducting themselves with their priestly functions. So let's take a look at some artifacts. First of all, it said that they found lamps. Now, we have what we call here a Herodian lamp. It's very plain. And the reason why it's plain is because the Jews had this commandment, no graven images. So they had this very plain lamp. We call them Herodian lamps simply because they're made during the Herodian period of Herod, his sons, and his grandsons. It wasn't that Herod was making lamps. They're just talking about when the lamps were used. Secondly, inkwells. Well, we have different types of inkwells, such as the ones that were found in Qumran. Some were made out of terracotta, and others were made out of bronze. Now, what I have here is actually, go ahead.
Just point out some of them that are actual artifacts and some of them are reproductions, just to.
Okay, yeah, well, this terracotta one right here is a reproduction. You can see how clean it looks.
Yeah.
Everything so far is authentic. These are around 2,000 years old.
Right.
Now, this stylus right here made of iron was not used to write in ink. This was actually used to write in wax.
Right.
All right. What else do we have?
It's got an eraser on the other end.
Yeah, you just like cover up your mistakes. And then we have a glass vial, perfume vial. Now it was the Romans that perfected the use of blowing glass. And we find a lot of these types of perfume vials in locations that were protected from being broken, which would be tombs. So a lot of these intact vials that we see on display in museums were protected because they were found in tombs. All right, what else do we have? Okay, I talked about stone vessels. This is a stone vessel made of limestone, and limestone was ritually pure. Matter of fact,
Cool.
It talks about stone vessels or vessels of purity when Jesus was with his disciples at the marriage feast. And they poured water into the stone vessels because of their ritual purity. And then they used a cup to drip into these stone vats because they're huge. They could hold like 50 gallons of water. And you dip, and then he takes it to the what is called the governor of the feast. Another was the individual presiding over the wedding ceremony. And they give it to that individual because they dipped it in water, dipped it in the container holding the water. In between where they dipped it and give it to the governor of the feast, it was turned into wine. So water into wine, and was carried in a stone vessel. And the water was poured into a stone vessel because in the Bible it says it was ritually pure. This is what they're talking about. And this was what was found in that priestly house as well.
Right.
Now, it said that...
So the person living there was practicing ritual purity, so likely a Jew, and given that the name Katros is connected to the priestly order, scholars believe that the person who lived there was a member of the priestly order.
I think that's a likely thought, don't you? Because they found the weight, right? They found the Herodian weight with the name on it, Katros, which is the name of that priestly family, and a house that was built in the first century on the upper west side of Jerusalem. And they had a lot of, you could say, terracotta and ritual items that kind of would suggest that they were wealthy. Another thing they found was an iron Roman spear, probably for defensive purposes. There, let me go like this so you can see it. Now, this one isn't Roman, but it's made of iron, and it is a spear. So it gives us the idea of what exactly was found. It's unique because it's iron. Iron usually doesn't stay preserved in an excavation because iron rusts. So it's very difficult and rare to find anything made of iron. Right. What else? Okay, then they found coins between 67 and 69 CE. Those coins would have been, the way the article is written, probably revolt coins. But these are just typical coins from, you can see the first century, where we have the shekel of Tyre that was used in the temple for buying and selling because of its content of pure silver. Beneath that was the Roman denarius, with the image of Titus on it. We read about this particular coin in the gospel where Jesus says, show me a coin whose inscription, whose image. They said that's Titus will render unto Caesar's what is Caesar's. That would have been a Roman denarius. Even in the Bible, I think they called it a tribute penny.
Yeah.
But it really wasn't a penny. I think that King James actually says tribute penny. Beneath that, we have what we call the smallest of coins in the Bible. It's referred to as the widow's mite. I think the Jewish culture calls it the pluta, and the Greek, the lipton. Is that how it goes, David?
Yeah, well, the Greek word that's used in the translation of the Bible, of course, it was written in Greek, uses the word leptos.
Leptos, yes.
But in Hebrew, the word is pruta. So it's pruta is what's generally accepted as the widow's mite.
Now, what's interesting about the pruta is that you have some that were actually struck all the way back to the Hasmonean period. So you can think some of these would be well over 100 years old, and they're still in circulation because they made thousands of them. Thousands.
Yeah.
So today's little presentation on the burnt house, okay, you can find it today in Jerusalem's western quarter of the old city. It was a house that was destroyed during the first Jewish revolt. What they found was ritual vessels made of limestone, terracotta lamps of the Herodian style, glass perfume vials, and then also different inkwells, some terracotta and some bronze. And lastly, an iron spear. So, David, if one has the time and they're in Jerusalem, I do encourage people to visit the burnt house.
Great. Thanks very much, Sir George. Good overview. And I've not visited it. I've seen lots of photographs, but I never had the privilege of touring it. But well worth it. From what I've seen from the photographs, it's a pretty nice display. So great. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, it's my privilege to share this with everybody, and hopefully in time they can go visit this location. All right. So I'm done. That's my presentation today, David.
Great.
As I say, that's my story, and I'm stuck with it.
Great. Well, everyone, certainly like and subscribe, and our subscribers keep going up. We continue to bring some new we've got some new guests in the wings that'll be bringing some good information to us. So stay tuned. We've got lots more to come.
Absolutely. Everybody have a great day. Thank you for your time.